To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Drew Goodrich had always believed in the American dream, and by all accounts, he'd achieved it. At 38, he owned a successful construction company that specialized in custom homes for the wealthy elite of Millbrook, a picturesque town nestled in the mountains of Colorado. His crews were loyal, his reputation sterling, and his bank account healthy enough to afford the kind of life he dreamed of as a kid growing up in foster care. The centerpiece of that life was his family. Catherine Clements Goodrich, his wife of 12 years, was everything he'd thought he wanted: elegant, intelligent, and sophisticated in ways that still sometimes made him feel like the rough-around-the-edges construction worker he'd once been. She worked as a real estate agent for high-end properties, her sharp business sense complementing his hands-on approach to building. Together, they'd created what everyone in town considered the perfect partnership. Their children were the light of his existence. Emma, 10 years old with her mother's sharp wit and her father's stubborn determination, and Jake, 8, whose boundless energy and curiosity reminded Drew of himself at that age. Every morning, Drew made them pancakes before school, and every evening, he helped with homework while Catherine prepared dinner. It was a routine that felt sacred to him. "Dad, can we go fishing this weekend?" Jake asked over breakfast that Tuesday morning, syrup dripping down his chin as he attacked his stack of pancakes. "We'll see, buddy. I've got the Morrison project wrapping up, and your mom has that big showing on Saturday." Catherine looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through emails. "Actually, I might need to reschedule that. The Savage property is proving more complicated than expected." Drew paused mid-sip of his coffee. "Savage? Ivan Savage. You know him?" "Of him. He's got a reputation around construction circles. Not a good one." Drew had heard whispers about Ivan Savage, a man who'd moved to town 5 years ago with unclear sources of wealth and a tendency to make problems disappear. "What kind of property is he looking at?" "That old warehouse complex on the east side. Wants to convert it into luxury condos." Catherine's tone was casual, but Drew noticed she didn't meet his eyes. "It's a huge commission if it goes through." After breakfast, Drew kissed his family goodbye and headed to the Morrison job site. The Morrisons were old money, the kind of clients who demanded perfection and paid well for it. Their mountainside estate was nearly complete, a testament to Drew's reputation for quality work. His foreman, Alejandro Walls, met him at the truck. "Morning, boss. We should have the final walkthrough ready by Thursday. Mrs. Morrison wants to see the wine cellar installation." "Good. Make sure the temperature controls are calibrated perfectly. These people don't do good enough." As they walked through the house, Drew's phone buzzed. Catherine, texting about picking up her coat from Cook's dry cleaning. Such a mundane detail in what would turn out to be the last normal day of his life. The workday proceeded smoothly. Drew's crews respected him because he'd never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Even now, with a successful business, he wasn't above picking up a hammer or getting his hands dirty. It was that work ethic, learned in the foster system where no one looked out for you but yourself, that had built his reputation and his fortune. At 5:30, Drew wrapped up at the site and headed toward Cook's dry cleaning. Benny Cook had been cleaning clothes in Millbrook for 35 years. A small, wiry man with perpetually stained fingers and kind eyes, Benny knew everyone in town and everyone's business, though he was discreet enough never to gossip. The bell above the door chimed as Drew entered. The familiar smell of cleaning solvents and pressed fabric filled the air. Benny looked up from behind the counter, his usual smile notably absent. "Drew, good, you're here." Benny's voice was lower than usual, almost urgent. "Just picking up Catherine's coat. She said you called it was ready." Benny nodded, but didn't move toward the rack of clean clothes. Instead, he glanced toward the windows, as if checking for observers. "Drew, we need to talk." In the back. Something in Benny's tone made Drew's construction-honed instincts prickle. After 20 years of managing workers and dealing with everything from OSHA inspectors to difficult clients, he'd learned to read people. Benny Cook was scared. They moved to the small office behind the counter, cluttered with invoices and old cleaning equipment. Benny closed the door and turned to face Drew, his weathered hands shaking slightly. "I've known you since you first came to town, Drew. You're a good man. That's why I'm going to tell you something that could get me killed." Drew's blood chilled. "Benny, what are you talking about?" I found something in Catherine's coat. Something that. Benny paused, running a hand through his thinning hair. Listen to me carefully. Grab your kids and leave this town before morning. What? Benny, you're scaring me. What did you find? Benny opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag, the kind used for dry, cleaning small items found in pockets. Inside was a piece of paper, folded small. I almost threw it away. Would have, if I hadn't recognized the handwriting. Benny's voice dropped to a whisper. It's a contract, Drew. A contract with your name on it. Drew took the bag with hands that had steadied beams and handled million-dollar machinery, but now trembled as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Catherine's. He'd seen it on grocery lists and birthday cards for 12 years. But the words made his blood turn to ice. Target, Drew Goodrich. Timeline, before December 15th. Method, accident preferred. Payment, $500,000 plus insurance payout. Contact, I asked for final arrangements. At the bottom, in Catherine's neat script, make it look convincing. The kids can't know. Drew read it twice, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. This had to be some kind of mistake, some kind of sick joke. But the handwriting was Catherine's, and the paper was real, and Benny Cook wasn't the kind of man who played pranks. Yes, Drew said quietly. Ivan Savage. Benny nodded grimly. That's what I figured. Drew, I don't know what's going on between you and Catherine, but this is serious. These aren't people you mess around with. Drew's mind raced through the past few months, looking for signs he'd missed. Catherine's late nights, attributed to difficult clients. Her increased interest in his life insurance policy, which she'd convinced him to double last year. Her sudden friendships with people he didn't know. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. How long do I have? The timeline says December 15th. That's 5 days from now. 5 days. Drew looked at the note again, focusing on the most chilling part. The kids can't know. Catherine was planning his murder, and she wanted their children to believe it was an accident. She wanted Emma and Jake to mourn their father while she collected insurance money and started a new life. But Catherine had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the one thing that had kept Drew alive through a childhood in foster care, through building a business from nothing, through every challenge he'd faced. He was a survivor, and he never gave up without a fight. Benny, Drew said, his voice steady now, I need you to do something for me. Can you make a copy of this note before I take it? Already done. Benny handed him a photocopy. Originals in my safe deposit box at the bank. Just in case. Drew nodded, his mind already working. Catherine thought she was married to a simple construction worker, someone who could be eliminated easily. She had no idea that the foster kid who'd built an empire from nothing was about to become her worst nightmare. One more thing, Benny. If anyone asks, Catherine's coat was clean. Nothing unusual about it. Drew, what are you planning? Drew smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile his children knew. It was the smile he'd worn when facing down bullies in foster care, when competing for his first construction contracts, when protecting what was his. I'm going to give my wife exactly what she deserves. Chapter 2, The Investigation. Drew drove home in a daze, the note burning in his pocket like a piece of coal. Everything around him looked the same. The tree-lined streets of his neighborhood, the Christmas lights beginning to appear on houses, the familiar rhythm of suburban life. But underneath, his world had shifted on its axis. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw Catherine's BMW already there. Through the kitchen window, he could see her helping Jake with homework while Emma set the table. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting of domestic bliss, and it made Drew's stomach turn. How long had she been planning this? How many times had she kissed him goodnight while calculating the timeline of his death? Drew sat in his truck for a moment, forcing himself to breathe steadily. In construction, panic got people killed. When a beam was falling or machinery malfunctioned, the men who survived were the ones who stayed calm and thought clearly. This was no different, except the stakes were his life and his children's future. He walked into the house, his face carefully neutral. Daddy. Jake launched himself at Drew's legs with typical 8-year-old enthusiasm. Mom says we might go skiing this weekend. That sounds great, buddy. Drew ruffled his son's hair, then looked up at Catherine. She was smiling at him with the same warm expression she'd worn for 12 years. Either she was a better actress than he'd ever imagined, or she'd compartmentalized his planned murder so completely it didn't affect her daily routine. How was your day? She asked, The question so normal it felt surreal. Good. Picked up your coat from Benny's. Oh, wonderful, thank you. I was worried I'd need to wear that old winter jacket to the Savage property showing tomorrow. There it was again, Ivan Savage. Drew hung the coat in the hall closet, noting how Catherine watched him do it. Was she checking to see if he'd found anything? Or was his paranoia making him see threats everywhere? Dinner proceeded normally. Emma chattered about her upcoming school play. Jake demonstrated his latest karate moves, and Catherine discussed her real estate deals with the same enthusiasm she always showed. But Drew found himself studying his wife with new eyes. Catherine was beautiful. Auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of elegant bone structure that aged gracefully. But tonight, Drew noticed things he'd overlooked before. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at him. How she steered conversations away from topics that might reveal too much about her day. The expensive jewelry she'd been wearing lately, pieces he didn't remember buying her. After the kids went to bed, Catherine settled next to Drew on the couch with a glass of wine. You seem quiet tonight. Everything okay? Just tired. The Morrison project is almost done, but Mrs. Morrison is being particularly demanding. Well, once you finish that, we'll have a nice cushion in the bank. Speaking of which, I was thinking we should review our life insurance policies. Make sure everything's up to date. Drew's blood went cold, but he kept his expression neutral. Why the sudden interest? Not sudden. I've been thinking about it for months. With the business doing so well, we should make sure we're properly covered. What if something happened to you? The kids and I would need to be taken care of. The casual way she discussed his potential death made Drew want to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she confessed everything. Instead, he nodded. You're right. We should review everything. Catherine smiled and curled up against him, her head on his shoulder. Drew stared at the ceiling, his wife's warmth against him feeling like a snake coiled around his body. The next morning, after Catherine left for her Savage property showing and the kids were at school, Drew made a series of calls. His first was to Marcus Reed, a private investigator he'd used to check backgrounds on potential business partners. Drew, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need a complete background check on my wife. Silence on the other end. Marcus was a professional who'd heard everything, but this clearly caught him off guard. Your wife? Drew, are you sure about this? I'm sure. I need to know everything. Financial records, phone records if possible, who she's been meeting with, everything. This is going to be expensive, and it's going to be thorough. Are you prepared for what I might find? I'm prepared. Give me 48 hours. Next, Drew called his lawyer, Vincent Sellers, a sharp attorney who'd handled his business incorporation and real estate deals. Vincent, I need to discuss updating my will and potentially some divorce proceedings. Divorce? Drew, I thought you and Catherine were happy. Things change. Can we meet this afternoon? And Vincent, this conversation is confidential. Completely confidential. Of course. 2 o'clock. Drew's final call was to his sister-in-law, Marianne Hancock, Catherine's younger sister who lived in Denver. He'd always liked Marianne, finding her more genuine and down-to-earth than Catherine. If anyone might have insights into Catherine's recent behavior, it would be her. Drew, what a nice surprise. Catherine said you've been working nonstop. You know how it is. Marianne, can I ask you something? Has Catherine mentioned anything about being unhappy? About our marriage? Another pause. Drew was learning that his questions were making everyone uncomfortable. Drew, this is awkward. Catherine is my sister. I know, but I'm worried about her. About us. She seems different lately, and I'm wondering if she's talked to you about anything. Marianne sighed. She's been stressed about money lately. Said the real estate market is getting more competitive, and she's under pressure to land bigger deals. And what? She's been asking questions about you. About your work, your schedule, your business partners. At first I thought she was planning a surprise for your birthday or something, but it's been months of questions. Drew's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of questions? Things like what happens to your business if something happens to you. Whether you have any enemies in the construction world. It was strange, Drew. I told her she should just ask you directly. Did she mention anyone named Ivan Savage? Yes, actually. She said he was a potential client, but she seemed nervous about him. Said he was the kind of man who got what he wanted, no matter what. After he hung up, Drew sat in his truck outside the Millbrook Community Bank. Inside, he had safety deposit boxes containing important documents, including copies of contracts and business records. He was about to add one more item Benny's photocopy of the murder contract. As he walked into the bank, Drew's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Savage showing went well. He's very interested in moving forward. This could be the deal that changes everything for us. Drew stared at the message. She was right. This would change everything for them. Just not in the way she thought. That afternoon, Drew met with Vincent Sellers at the lawyer's downtown office. Vincent was a meticulous man in his 50s who'd built his practice on being thorough and discreet. Before we discuss your situation, Drew, I have to ask, are you in any physical danger? Drew considered the question. Potentially. Then we need to be very careful about how we proceed. If you suspect Catherine is planning to harm you, we should involve the police. Not yet. I need more evidence, and I need to make sure my children are protected. Drew leaned forward. Vincent, if something happens to me in the next few days, I need you to know it wasn't an accident. Vincent's face grew grave. Drew, what exactly is going on? Drew told him about the note, about Ivan Savage, about Catherine's sudden interest in life insurance. As he spoke, Vincent took careful notes. This is serious, Drew. We're talking about conspiracy to commit murder. But you're right. We need more evidence before involving law enforcement. In the meantime, I'm going to draft some documents that protect your assets and ensure your children's custody goes to who you specify, not automatically to Catherine. Can you do that without her knowing? Yes, but if something happens to you, she'll find out quickly. The question is, what's your plan here? You can't just wait for them to try to kill you. Drew smiled grimly. I'm not waiting for anything. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, just not the way they expect. When Drew got home that evening, Catherine was cooking dinner and humming softly. She seemed happier than she'd been in weeks, practically glowing with satisfaction. Good day, he asked. Very good. Ivan is moving forward with the warehouse conversion. It's going to be a massive project. She turned to him, her eyes bright. This is it, Drew. This is the deal that sets us up for life. Drew nodded, pouring himself a glass of water. I'm happy for you. That night, as Catherine slept beside him, Drew stared at the ceiling and finalized his plan. His wife had made one crucial miscalculation. She thought she was hunting a sheep, but she'd actually cornered a wolf. And this wolf had spent his entire life learning how to survive. Chapter 3. The Discovery. Marcus Reed called at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before Drew usually woke up. Drew slipped out of bed and took the call in his home office, closing the door softly. Drew, you need to sit down for this. I'm sitting. Your wife has been living a double life for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus laid out a picture that made Drew's blood run cold. Catherine had been meeting regularly with Ivan Savage for 8 months, initially under the guise of real estate dealings, but their relationship had clearly evolved beyond business. Bank records showed cash deposits in Catherine's personal account, money that didn't correspond to any legitimate real estate commissions. There's more, Marcus continued. Catherine has been researching your daily routines obsessively. She hired a private detective 6 months ago to track your movements, your work schedule, even your route to and from job sites. She was planning this for months. It gets worse. I found communication between Catherine and someone using encrypted messaging apps. The few messages I could trace referenced the accident and removing obstacles. Drew, I also found something else, a $2 million life insurance policy on you that Catherine took out 9 months ago. You never signed for it, but your signature is on the documents. Drew felt the world tilt. Forgery. Professional quality. Someone who knew what they were doing. What about Ivan Savage? That's where this gets interesting. Ivan Savage isn't his real name. His actual name is Ivan Petrov, and he's got connections to organized crime in Chicago. He moved to Millbrook 5 years ago after some kind of incident that made Chicago too hot for him. The warehouse property Catherine is supposedly selling him? He already owns it. Has for 3 years. Drew absorbed this information, his mind racing. So the real estate deal is completely fake. Completely. It's just a cover story for their meetings. Drew, these people are professionals. They've done this before. How do you know? Because I found records of 2 other insurance payouts in Ivan's past. Different states, different identities, but the pattern is the same. Befriend a successful businessman, get close to his wife, arrange an accident, split the insurance money. Drew hung up the phone feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just about his marriage or even his life. He was being hunted by professional killers who had turned his wife into bait. Catherine was already awake when he returned to the bedroom. checking her phone with unusual intensity. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Work call. Emergency at the Morrison site. This early. Pipes burst overnight. I need to get over there." Catherine nodded sympathetically, but Drew noticed she seemed relieved that he'd be leaving the house. As he dressed, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Your wife wants to meet today. Final arrangements." Yes. Drew realized with cold clarity that Catherine had given Ivan Savage his phone number. They were moving up their timeline. Instead of going to a job site, Drew drove to Marcus Reed's office. Marcus was a former police detective who'd gone private after 20 years on the force. His office was sparse but functional, with filing cabinets that locked and a safe built into the wall. "The text changes things," Marcus said after Drew showed it to him. "They're accelerating the plan." "Why?" "Could be any number of reasons. Maybe they're getting nervous. Maybe they have another target lined up. Or maybe Catherine is starting to crack under the pressure." Drew thought about Catherine's behavior the past few days. The artificial cheerfulness, the way she'd been watching him more closely, the nervous energy she couldn't quite hide. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me. I want you to follow Catherine today, but I also want you to arrange something else." "What?" "I want you to make it look like I'm going to be at the old Morrison quarry site this afternoon. Alone. Make sure Ivan Savage knows about it." Marcus stared at him. "Drew, you can't be serious. That's suicide." "No, it's not. It's the only way to get them both in the same place at the same time, with evidence of their intent." Drew leaned forward. "Marcus, I've been thinking about this all night. These people have killed before, and they'll kill again after me if we don't stop them. The police need evidence of an actual attempt, not just notes and suspicious meetings. You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about ending this before they succeed." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to make sure the right people know where I'll be and when. I need recording equipment. And I need backup that won't arrive too early." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Marcus would plan information about Drew's afternoon location through channels that would reach Ivan Savage. He'd provide Drew with a wire and arrange for police backup to arrive at precisely the right moment. It was risky, but it was the only way to catch them in the act. At noon, Drew drove to Emma and Jake's school. He wanted to see his children one more time before he put his plan into motion. He found them at lunch, their faces lighting up when they saw him. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Emma asked. "Just wanted to say hi to my favorite kids." Jake hugged him fiercely. "Are you taking us fishing this weekend like you promised?" "We'll see, buddy. I love you both, you know that." "We love you too, Dad," Emma said, giving him a look that was far too perceptive for a 10-year-old. "Is everything okay?" Drew kissed the top of her head. "Everything's going to be fine." As he left the school, Drew's phone rang. "Catherine." "Drew, where are you?" "I thought you were at the Morrison site." "Just finished there." "What?" "I was hoping we could have lunch. There are some things we should discuss." "What kind of things?" "Our future. Our plans." Catherine's voice had an odd quality to it, like she was reading from a script. "Why don't you meet me at that little cafe downtown? Say 2 o'clock. Drew realized this was it. Catherine was trying to establish an alibi for the time of his planned murder. While she was publicly having lunch downtown, Ivan Savage would be at the quarry site, waiting to make Drew's death look like an industrial accident. "I can't make lunch today. I've got to check on the quarry site this afternoon. Equipment issues." A pause. "The quarry site? The old Morrison quarry?" "Yeah. Probably be there around 3:30. "Drew, be careful out there. That place is dangerous." The fake concern in her voice made Drew's skin crawl. "I will be. Love you." "Love you too." As Drew hung up, he realized that might be the last time Catherine ever said those words to him. The woman he'd married, the mother of his children, had just confirmed the location where she expected him to die. Drew spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. He tested the recording equipment Marcus had given him, reviewed the layout of the quarry site, and made peace with the possibility that his plan might go wrong. But he also thought about Emma and Jake, about the life he'd built, about all the reasons he had to survive. At 3:15, Drew drove toward the old Morrison quarry, an abandoned stone quarry on the outskirts of town that his company sometimes used to source materials. It was isolated, surrounded by woods, with plenty of places where an accident could happen to a man working alone. As he drove, Drew's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Having coffee with Marion downtown. We'll be here until 5. Love you." She was establishing her alibi, making sure she could prove she was nowhere near the quarry when Drew died. But Catherine had made one final miscalculation. The man driving toward that quarry wasn't the trusting husband she thought she'd married. He was someone who'd learned to fight dirty in foster care, who'd built a business through grit and determination, and who would do whatever it took to protect his children. Drew Goodrich was about to remind everyone exactly what kind of man he really was. Chapter 4. The Trap. Drew arrived at the Morrison Quarry at exactly 3:30 p.m. The abandoned site stretched out before him like a moonscape, scarred earth, massive piles of crushed stone, and the deep, water-filled pit that gave the quarry its ominous reputation. His company had a legitimate reason to be here occasionally, sourcing specialty stone for high-end projects. But today the site was completely deserted. The recording equipment Marcus had given him was state-of-the-art, disguised as a regular work radio and hard hat. Drew tested it one final time, knowing that the next hour would either vindicate him or end his life. He positioned his truck near the main equipment shed, making it visible from the access road. To anyone watching, it would look like he was conducting routine business, checking on stored materials or planning for future projects. In reality, he was setting the stage for a confrontation that had been building for months. Drew's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Police are in position, but out of sight. Recording is active. Stay safe. At 3:45, Drew heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. Through the trees, he spotted a black SUV making its way down the access road. Ivan Savage was punctual. Drew had to give him that. Drew positioned himself near a pile of crushed granite, giving himself cover while maintaining clear sight lines to the access road. His construction background had taught him to always know his exits and never get trapped in a corner. The SUV parked about 50 yards away, and Drew got his first clear look at Ivan Savage in person. The man was exactly what Central Casting would order for a villain: tall, broad-shouldered, with cold eyes and the kind of expensive casual where that screamed money and menace. He wasn't alone. A second man emerged from the passenger side, younger but equally dangerous looking. Drew activated his recording device and stepped into view. "You must be Ivan Savage," he called out, his voice carrying across the quarry. "I got your message." Ivan smiled, but it was the smile of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "Drew Goodrich. We finally meet in person." "Yeah, though I have to say, the circumstances aren't what I expected when I married Catherine." Ivan laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Catherine is quite a woman. Smart, beautiful, and most importantly, practical. She understands that sometimes marriages need to evolve. Evolve into murder? Such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as strategic retirement." Drew forced himself to remain calm, even as every instinct screamed at him to run. "So this is how it works? You seduce unhappy wives and help them cash in on their husband's life insurance. I provide solutions to people's problems." Catherine's problem was being married to someone who wasn't providing the lifestyle she deserved. Ivan began walking closer, his companion flanking to the right. "She deserves better than a construction worker who smells like sawdust and plays with building blocks." Drew felt anger flare, but controlled it. Ivan was trying to provoke him, make him do something stupid. Funny thing, though, Catherine never seemed unhappy to me, right up until I found out she was planning to murder me. Women are complicated creatures, Drew. They don't always say what they mean. Ivan was now about 20 feet away, close enough that the recording device would pick up every word clearly. But their actions speak volumes. "Catherine came to me, you know, not the other way around." "Is that so?" "Oh yes. She approached me at a real estate showing 8 months ago. Started asking questions about how much money I had, whether I was married, whether I might be interested in an attractive woman who was tired of her boring life." Ivan's smile widened. "She practically threw herself at me." Drew felt like he'd been punched. Catherine had initiated this. She'd sought out Ivan Savage? "I can see that surprises you," Ivan continued. "Did you really think your wife was seduced by my charms? Catherine is far too calculating for that. She wanted out of your marriage, and she wanted to profit from it. I simply provided the means. And you've done this before. I'm a businessman, Drew. I identify market opportunities and capitalize on them. There are many unhappy wives in America, and many of them are married to men with excellent life insurance policies." Ivan's companion had circled around and was now positioned behind a pile of equipment, cutting off one of Drew's potential escape routes. But Drew wasn't planning to escape. He was planning to survive. Here's what's going to happen, Ivan said, pulling a pistol from inside his jacket. You're going to have a tragic accident. Heavy machinery, unstable quarry walls, the kind of thing that happens to construction workers all the time. Catherine will be devastated, of course, but she'll manage to move on with the help of a $2 million insurance payout. And you get half. I get what I deserve for facilitating Catherine's freedom. Drew laughed, surprising both men. You know what's funny, Ivan? You're absolutely right about one thing. Catherine is calculating. But I think you've miscalculated something important. What's that? You think Catherine is going to share $2 million with you? Ivan's smile faltered slightly. We have an agreement. Oh, I'm sure you do. But agreements can change, can't they? Especially once the person you're counting on has what she wants. Drew took a step closer. See, I know my wife better than you think. Catherine doesn't like to share, and she definitely doesn't like loose ends. You're trying to drive a wedge between us. It won't work. Am I? Or am I pointing out something you already suspected? Drew could see uncertainty creeping into Ivan's eyes. Tell me, Ivan, what happens to you after I'm dead? Catherine gets her money, starts her new life, but what does she need you for? You're not exactly the settling down type, and you're certainly not the kind of man she'd introduce to Emma and Jake. Ivan's gun hand tightened, but Drew pressed on. In fact, I'd say you're a liability. The only person who can connect Catherine to my murder. The only witness who knows she planned the whole thing. Drew smiled coldly. How long do you think it'll be before she decides you're too dangerous to keep around? Enough. Ivan raised the gun, pointing it directly at Drew's chest. You're trying to save your own skin by making me paranoid. Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to save both our skins by pointing out that we're both expendable in Catherine's plan. For a moment, the quarry was silent except for the distant sound of wind through the trees. Drew could see Ivan processing what he'd said, weighing the possibilities. The man was a professional killer, but he wasn't stupid. Even if you're right, Ivan said finally, that doesn't change the situation. You still have to die. Actually, Drew said, I don't think I do. That's when Marcus Reed stepped out from behind the equipment shed, his own weapon drawn and pointed at Ivan's companion. Police, drop your weapons. The next few seconds unfolded in slow motion. Ivan's companion reached for his gun, but Marcus was faster and more experienced. A single shot echoed across the quarry, and the man dropped. Ivan spun toward Marcus, momentarily distracted, and Drew dove behind the granite pile as gunfire erupted. But Ivan Savage hadn't survived this long by being reckless. Instead of engaging in a gun battle he couldn't win, he sprinted toward his SUV. Drew heard the engine roar to life and emerged from cover to see the black SUV speeding toward the access road. But Marcus had anticipated this too. Police cars were already blocking the exit, their red and blue lights flashing in the afternoon sun. The SUV skidded to a stop, and Ivan Savage, professional killer and destroyer of families, stepped out with his hands raised. Drew, you okay? Marcus called out. Drew nodded, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Yeah, did we get everything? Marcus tapped his own recording device. Every word. Ivan Savage just confessed to multiple murders and conspiracy to commit murder. We've got him dead to rights. As police officers swarmed the scene, Drew felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Ivan Savage was in custody, his confession recorded and witnessed. But the most important confrontation was still ahead. It was time to deal with Catherine. Chapter 5, The Revelation. By 6 p.m., the Morrison Quarry looked like a crime scene from a television show. Police cars, ambulances, evidence technicians, and yellow tape stretched across the access roads. Drew had given his statement twice, turned over the recording equipment, and watched Ivan Savage get loaded into a police car in handcuffs. Detective Aaron Reese, a 20-year veteran of the Millbrook Police Department, was handling the case. Drew had met him before at community events, and he was grateful to have someone competent in charge. This is one hell of a story, Drew, Reese said as they stood beside Drew's truck. You realize how close you came to getting killed today? I realize it. We'll need Catherine brought in for questioning, but we want to do this carefully. She doesn't know we've arrested Ivan yet, and we want to keep it that way until we can get her statement. Drew checked his phone. Multiple missed calls and texts from Catherine, increasingly frantic as the afternoon had worn on. Drew, where are you? I'm getting worried. Please call me back. The police called asking about you. What's going on? Drew, call me now. She knows something's wrong, Drew said, showing the messages to Detective Reese. All the better. Panicked suspects make mistakes. Reese studied Drew carefully. How are you holding up? This is a lot to process. Finding out your wife was planning to murder you. Drew was quiet for a moment, watching the evidence technicians work. Detective, can I ask you something? Sure. In your experience, how long does it take to plan something like this? I mean really plan it, with fake insurance policies and hired killers. Months. Maybe longer. Why? I keep thinking about my kids. Emma and Jake. They've been living in the same house with someone who was planning their father's murder. Drew's voice hardened. They've been hugging her goodnight, trusting her to take care of them, while she was arranging to make them orphans. Reese nodded grimly. That's the part that always gets to me about these cases. The collateral damage. Catherine made one mistake, though. What's that? She assumed I'd go down quietly, that I was just some dumb construction worker who wouldn't see it coming. Drew smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She forgot that the foster kid who built his own business from nothing might have a few survival skills she hadn't counted on. At 7 p.m., Drew finally called Catherine back. Drew. Oh my God, where have you been? I've been terrified something happened to you. The concern in her voice was so convincing that for a moment, Drew wondered if he'd made some horrible mistake. But then he remembered the note, the insurance policy, Ivan's confession. I'm fine. There was an incident at the quarry site. Police are still here taking statements. What kind of incident? Someone tried to rob me. Can you believe that? At the quarry of all places. Rob you? Drew, are you hurt? No, I'm okay. The guy ran off when someone else showed up. Drew paused. Catherine, where are you right now? I'm at home with the kids. I picked them up from school when I couldn't reach you. Emma's worried. She said you seemed upset when you visited them at lunch. Drew felt a stab of guilt. His children were home with a woman who'd been planning to murder their father, and they had no idea. I'll be home in about an hour. Don't mention any of this to the kids, okay? I don't want them to worry. Of course not. As Drew hung up, Detective Reese approached him. We're ready to move. I'm going to need you to act completely normal when you get home. Don't let on that anything has changed. What about my kids? Child services will be standing by, but we're hoping to minimize their trauma. If Catherine cooperates and confesses, we can handle this without making a scene in front of them. Drew drove home through familiar streets that now felt foreign. Every house, every turn, every landmark was the same, but he was returning as a different man than the one who'd left that morning. He was no longer a trusting husband, but a survivor who'd looked death in the face and outmaneuvered it. The lights were on in his house when he pulled into the driveway. Through the windows, he could see Catherine in the kitchen, probably making dinner like she had thousands of times before. It was such a normal, domestic scene that Drew had to remind himself what she'd really been planning. He walked through the front door to the sound of his children's voices. Dad, Jake came running, launching himself at Drew's legs. Mom said you had a bad day at work. It wasn't great, buddy, but it's better now. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, studying her father with those two perceptive eyes. Dad, you look different. Different how? I don't know. Tired, maybe. But also. She struggled for the word. Relieved. Drew was amazed by his daughter's intuition. I am relieved. Work stuff got resolved. Catherine emerged from the kitchen, and Drew got his first look at his wife since discovering her betrayal. She looked exactly the same, beautiful, concerned, loving. But now Drew could see the performance underneath. The slightly too bright smile, the way she watched his face for reactions, the tension in her shoulders that suggested she was ready to run if necessary. How are you feeling? She asked, crossing to him and placing a hand on his chest. You look shaken up. The touch that had once comforted him now made his skin crawl. I'm okay. Just glad to be home. Catherine made his favorite dinner, pot roast with vegetables, something she hadn't cooked in months. As they ate, she kept the conversation light, asking about the kids' days at school and discussing weekend plans. But Drew noticed she kept checking her phone, and her eyes darted to the windows whenever a car passed by. Expecting someone? Drew asked. What? Oh no. I've just been jumpy since you called about the robbery attempt. Makes you realize how dangerous it is out there. After dinner, Drew helped the kids with homework while Catherine cleaned the kitchen. It was their normal routine, but tonight it felt like a performance for an audience he couldn't see. At 8:30, The doorbell rang. Catherine froze in the kitchen, a dish towel in her hands. Drew could see the panic in her eyes as she realized that whoever was at the door wasn't part of her plan. "I'll get it," Drew said. Detective Reese stood on the front porch with two uniformed officers, their expressions professionally neutral. "Evening, Drew. We need to speak with Catherine." Drew nodded and stepped aside. "Catherine, there are some police officers here to see you." Catherine appeared in the hallway, her face carefully composed. "Officers, what can I do for you?" "Mrs. Goodrich, I'm Detective Reese. We'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions about Ivan Savage." The blood drained from Catherine's face. What about Ivan? You know Mr. Savage? He's a client. Real estate." Catherine's voice was steady, but Drew could see her hands trembling. "Has something happened to him?" "We'll discuss that at the station. You're not under arrest, but we would appreciate your cooperation." Catherine looked at Drew, and for a moment he saw something that might have been genuine emotion. Fear, regret, maybe even love. But it passed quickly, replaced by the calculating look he now recognized. "Of course. Let me just say good night to my children." "Mom, what's happening?" Emma had appeared at the top of the stairs, Jake beside her. "Nothing, sweetheart. The police just need to ask me some questions about work. I'll be back soon." Drew watched his wife lie to their children with the same ease she'd lied to him for months. But Emma wasn't fooled. Her young face was filled with worry and confusion. As Catherine gathered her purse and coat, Drew caught her arm. "Catherine." She looked at him with eyes that now seemed like a stranger's. "Yes. You should know. I found the note." Her face went completely white, and for a moment Drew thought she might faint. But Catherine was stronger than that. She straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The note in your coat pocket. The one Benny Cook found." Catherine's mask finally slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. Not the woman he'd married, but the person who'd been hiding inside her all along. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly. "I saved my life. You've destroyed your children's lives. Do you really think they're better off knowing their mother is a killer?" The casual admission stunned Drew. Catherine wasn't even denying it anymore. "They're better off knowing the truth." Catherine smiled, but it was cold and bitter. "The truth? The truth is that you were never good enough for me, Drew. Not smart enough, not sophisticated enough, not wealthy enough. I settled for you, and I've regretted it every day for 5 years. Then why didn't you just ask for a divorce?" "Because divorce doesn't pay $2 million. As the police led Catherine away, Drew heard Emma crying upstairs. His daughter had heard more than she should have, understood more than any 10-year-old should have to understand. Drew climbed the stairs to find both his children huddled together in Emma's room, tears streaming down their faces. "Dad?" Emma whispered. "Is Mom a bad person?" Drew sat on the bed and gathered both children into his arms, holding them while they cried. Outside, he could hear the police cars driving away, taking Catherine toward a future that would likely include a long prison sentence. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said honestly. "I don't know what Mom became, or why. But I know that you and Jake are good, and strong, and loved. And that's what matters now." It wasn't the ending Drew had wanted for his family, but it was the ending that would keep them all alive and safe. And sometimes, that had to be enough. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. The interrogation room at the Millbrook Police Department was standard issue: fluorescent lights, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and a two-way mirror that everyone pretended wasn't there. Catherine sat across from Detective Reese and District Attorney Jennifer Delgado, her hands folded in her lap, still maintaining the composed facade that had fooled Drew for so long. But Drew could see her through the observation window, and he noticed what the investigators might miss. The slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept checking the exit, the calculating look in her eyes as she weighed her options. Catherine was cornered, but she wasn't broken yet. "Mrs. Goodrich," Detective Reese began, "we've arrested Ivan Savage in connection with a conspiracy to commit murder." Your name came up during his confession. Catherine's expression remained neutral. "I don't understand. Ivan is a real estate client. What does he have to do with murder?" "According to Mr. Savage, you approached him 8 months ago with a proposal to kill your husband for his life insurance money." "That's absurd." Catherine's voice was steady, but Drew saw her jaw tighten slightly. "Why would I want to hurt Drew? We're happily married." District Attorney Delgado slid a folder across the table. "We have evidence that suggests otherwise." Financial records showing unexplained cash deposits, forged insurance documents, and a handwritten note in your possession detailing the murder plan. Catherine opened the folder and stared at the photocopy of her own handwriting. For the first time since entering the room, her composure cracked slightly. This could be fabricated. Anyone could have written this. Our handwriting experts have already analyzed it against known samples of your writing. It's a match. Delgado leaned forward. Catherine, we have Ivan Savage's full confession, recorded evidence of the conspiracy, and documentation of your forged insurance policy. You can make this easier on yourself by cooperating. Catherine was silent for a long moment, staring at the note. When she looked up, her eyes had hardened. I want a lawyer. The questioning stopped, but Drew continued watching through the window. Catherine sat perfectly still, her mind clearly racing. She knew the evidence against her was overwhelming, but she was still calculating angles, looking for ways out. Drew's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Reed. DA wants to meet with you. Additional evidence from Ivan's interrogation. 20 minutes later, Drew sat in Jennifer Delgado's office, a coffee he couldn't taste growing cold in his hands. The DA was a sharp woman in her 40s who'd built her reputation on successfully prosecuting complex cases. Drew, I need to prepare you for what we learned from Ivan Savage's extended confession. More victims. Yes, but also something closer to home. Delgado opened a file. Ivan provided details about how Catherine recruited him. It wasn't random. She'd been researching him for months before making contact. Researching how? She knew about his background, his previous arrangements with other wives. She specifically sought him out because of his reputation. Delgado paused. Catherine didn't just stumble into this conspiracy, Drew. She planned it methodically. Drew felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long? Based on Ivan's statement and our financial investigation, at least 18 months. Possibly longer. 18 months. Drew thought back to that time period. Jake had been in first grade, Emma in third. Catherine had seemed happy, involved in the kids' activities, affectionate with Drew. The whole time, she'd been planning his murder. There's more, Delgado continued. Ivan says Catherine had contingency plans. If the insurance scheme failed, she was prepared to divorce you and claim domestic abuse to get full custody and alimony. Domestic abuse? Drew's voice was sharp. I never laid a hand on her. We know that. But Catherine had been documenting supposed incidents. Photos of bruises she inflicted on herself, a secret journal claiming you were violent, recordings of arguments she provoked to get you angry on tape. Drew stared at the DA. She was going to destroy my reputation and take my kids? If the murder plan failed, yes. Ivan says she called it Plan B, ruin you socially and financially if she couldn't kill you physically. The depth of Catherine's betrayal was staggering. She hadn't just wanted him dead. She'd wanted to obliterate everything he'd built, including his relationship with his children. What happens now? Catherine will likely try to negotiate a plea deal. Her lawyer will argue that Ivan manipulated her, that she was coerced or frightened into cooperating. Delgado's expression was grim. But given the premeditation and the forged documents, we're looking at first-degree murder conspiracy. If convicted, she's facing life in prison. And my kids? That's complicated. Catherine is still their mother, and until she's convicted, she has parental rights. However, given the circumstances, child services will likely recommend that custody remain with you pending trial. That evening, Drew sat in his living room with Emma and Jake, trying to explain the inexplicable. How do you tell children that their mother was planning to kill their father? How do you maintain their sense of security when their world has been turned upside down? Is Mom coming home? Jake asked. At 8, he didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew something was terribly wrong. Not tonight, buddy. Mom has some legal problems she needs to work out. Emma, older and more perceptive, wasn't satisfied with vague answers. Dad, the police arrested Mom, didn't they? Drew looked at his daughter, seeing Catherine's intelligence in her eyes, but hoping desperately that she'd inherited his sense of right and wrong. Yes, they did. Because she did something bad? Yes. Something bad to you. Drew's throat tightened. Emma, your mom made some very poor choices. Choices that could have hurt our family. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with a maturity that broke Drew's heart. Dad, are we going to be okay? Drew pulled both children close. Yes, we're going to be okay. It might be hard for a while, and there might be times when we're all sad or confused, but we're going to get through this together. That night, after the kids were asleep, Drew stood in his bedroom looking at the space where Catherine's belongings had been. Her clothes were gone, taken as evidence. Her jewelry box, her personal items, the physical traces of 12 years of marriage, all removed by police. But the emotional traces were harder to erase. This was the room where they'd made love, where they'd talked about their dreams, where they'd planned their children's futures. Now Drew wondered how much of it had been real, and how much had been Catherine playing a role. His phone rang. Vincent Sellers, his attorney. Drew, Catherine's lawyer contacted me. She wants to see you. What? She's claiming she has information about other potential victims, other men Ivan Savage was targeting. But she'll only share it with you directly. Drew considered this. It's a trap. Probably. But it could also be an attempt to manipulate you into showing her mercy when it comes to sentencing. Or she might genuinely have information that could save lives. What do you think I should do? I think you should trust your instincts. You've been right about Catherine from the beginning. After hanging up, Drew sat in his empty bedroom and thought about the woman he'd married. Had she ever loved him, or had it all been an act? Had she loved their children, or were they just obstacles to her financial freedom? The questions would probably never have complete answers. But Drew realized that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was moving forward, protecting his children, and rebuilding their lives without the shadow of Catherine's betrayal. Catherine had tried to destroy him, but she'd miscalculated something fundamental about her husband. Drew Goodrich was a survivor, and survivors didn't just endure. They adapted, they grew stronger, and they protected what mattered most. His children were what mattered most now, and he'd spend the rest of his life making sure they felt safe, loved, and secure, everything Catherine had been willing to take away from them. The woman who'd shared his bed for 12 years was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd tried to orchestrate his murder. But Drew was still here, still standing, still fighting for his family's future. And that, he realized, was a kind of victory Catherine could never understand or take away. Chapter 7. The Counterstrike. 3 days after Catherine's arrest, Drew received an unexpected visitor. Vincent Sellers called to inform him that Russell Bishop, one of Denver's most expensive defense attorneys, had arrived in Millbrook to represent Catherine. The fact that she could afford someone of Bishop's caliber raised immediate red flags. Where's the money coming from? Drew asked Vincent during their emergency meeting. That's what we need to find out. Bishop doesn't come cheap. We're talking about a retainer that's easily 6 figures. Drew's suspicions were confirmed when Marcus Reed called an hour later. Drew, we have a problem. Someone posted Catherine's bail. What? How is that possible with murder conspiracy charges? The judge set it at $2 million. Someone posted it this morning, cash, not bond. Drew felt the familiar chill of impending danger. Ivan Savage. Can't be. He's still in custody, no bail. But Drew, there's something else. Catherine didn't go home when she was released. She's disappeared. What about my kids? That's why I'm calling. You need to get Emma and Jake and go somewhere safe. Now. Drew was already moving toward his truck. Where would she go? Unknown. But Drew, think about this logically. Someone with serious money wanted Catherine out of jail badly enough to risk $2 million. That suggests this conspiracy goes deeper than just Ivan Savage. As Drew drove toward the kids' school, his phone rang. Catherine. Hello, Drew. Her voice was different, colder, more confident than it had been during her arrest. The pretense of being a loving wife was completely gone. Catherine, where are you? Somewhere safe. I wanted to thank you, actually. Thank me. For being so predictably noble. Did you really think catching Ivan and having me arrested would end this? Drew felt his blood chill. What are you talking about? Ivan was a contractor, Drew. A hired hand. The real decision-makers are still out there, and they're not happy about your interference. Who are you working with? Catherine laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. People who don't like loose ends. People who invested significant resources in our arrangement and expect a return on their investment. Drew pulled into the school parking lot. Catherine, whatever you're involved in, think about Emma and Jake. I am thinking about them. That's why I'm giving you one last chance. Chance for what? To disappear quietly. Take the kids and leave Colorado. Change your names, start over somewhere far away, and never contact anyone from your old life again. And if I don't, then my associates will finish what Ivan started. But they won't be as careful about making it look accidental. And they won't be as concerned about collateral damage. The line went dead. Drew sat in his truck, hands shaking with rage. Catherine wasn't just threatening him anymore. She was threatening Emma and Jake. Drew called Detective Reese while walking toward the school entrance. "Detective, Catherine just threatened my children. We're already mobilizing. Drew, we need to get you and the kids into protective custody immediately." "No. No." Drew's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "I'm not running, and I'm not hiding my children because their mother decided to become a criminal. Drew, you don't understand what you're dealing with." "Actually, I think I'm starting to." Drew paused outside Emma's classroom. "Detective, I need you to do something for me. I need you to set up a meeting." "A meeting with who?" "With whoever bailed Catherine out." 20 minutes later, Drew had collected his children and driven to the one place he knew they'd be completely safe, Marcus Reed's office. Marcus had military experience and a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. "Dad, what's going on?" Emma asked as they climbed the stairs to the second-floor office. "Some bad people are trying to hurt our family, so we're staying with Mr. Reed until the police can stop them." Jake's eyes went wide. "Bad people like in the movies?" "Something like that, buddy." Marcus met them at the door, his expression grim. "Drew, I've been digging into Catherine's financial records. The money trail leads to some very unpleasant places." After getting the kids settled with tablets and snacks in a secure inner office, Marcus showed Drew what he'd discovered. The $2 million for bail came from a company called Mountain Vista Investments. On the surface, it looks like a legitimate real estate development firm. But when you dig deeper, Marcus pulled up a series of documents on his computer. Mountain Vista is owned by a network of shell companies that eventually trace back to organized crime interests in Chicago. The same people Ivan worked for? Not exactly. Ivan was freelance, but he did work for this organization before. Catherine somehow got connected to them independently. Drew studied the corporate structure charts Marcus had created. So Catherine wasn't just working with Ivan. She was working with a criminal organization. It gets worse. Mountain Vista has been buying property throughout Colorado, warehouses, rural land, buildings that could be used for money laundering or other illegal activities. The warehouse project Catherine was supposedly handling for Ivan. It's part of a much larger operation. What kind of operation? Marcus pulled up another set of documents. Based on the property acquisitions and the financial patterns, it looks like they're setting up a massive money laundering network. Dirty money from Chicago gets invested in Colorado real estate, then sold to legitimate buyers at a loss. The cash comes out clean on the other side. Drew felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. Catherine wasn't just helping them kill me for insurance money. She was helping them establish a criminal operation in Colorado. And now that their plan is blown, they need to tie up loose ends. Drew's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Riverside Park, 8 p.m. Come alone, or your children will suffer the consequences." Drew showed the message to Marcus. "They want to meet. It's obviously a trap." "Of course it is." Drew smiled grimly. "But they're making the same mistake Catherine made." "What mistake?" "They think I'm just going to walk into their trap and let them kill me." Drew spent the next 4 hours planning with Marcus and Detective Reese. By 7 p.m., they had surveillance teams positioned around Riverside Park, recording equipment tested, and a strategy that would either end the threat against his family or get him killed trying. "You sure about this, Drew?" Detective Reese asked as they made final preparations. "I'm sure. These people threatened my children. They turned my wife into a killer. They tried to destroy everything I've built." Drew checked his recording equipment one last time. "I'm not running, and I'm not spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." As Drew drove toward Riverside Park, he thought about Emma and Jake, safe in Marcus's office but probably terrified about their uncertain future. They deserved better than a life spent in hiding, always afraid that their mother's criminal associates might find them. Drew parked near the main entrance and walked toward the designated meeting spot, a picnic area overlooking the river. The park was mostly empty, just a few joggers and dog walkers enjoying the evening air. At exactly 8 p.m., 3 men emerged from the tree line. Drew recognized none of them, but their expensive suits and professional bearing screamed organized crime. The man in the middle was older, clearly the leader, with silver hair and cold eyes that had seen too much violence. "Mr. Goodrich, I'm Douglas Drew." The man's voice carried a slight Chicago accent. "We need to discuss your wife." Drew remained standing, maintaining distance between himself and the 3 men. "My wife is in police custody. Your wife is under our protection." Catherine made certain commitments to our organization, and we intend to see them fulfilled. What kind of commitments? Douglas smiled, but it held no warmth. Catherine promised to provide us with detailed information about Millbrook's business community, who has money, who has secrets, who might be vulnerable to our particular brand of persuasion. Your death was just the beginning of a much larger operation. Drew felt sick. Catherine hadn't just been planning to murder him. She'd been planning to help these criminals target other families in their community. How many people were you planning to kill? As many as necessary. Millbrook is a wealthy town full of people who think they're safe in their mountain paradise. Catherine was going to help us show them how wrong they were. And now, Douglas's expression hardened. Now you've disrupted our plans and cost us a significant investment. That requires compensation. What kind of compensation? Your life, obviously. But first, you're going to help us complete Catherine's work. You know this town, these people. You're going to help us identify our next targets. Drew laughed, surprising all three men. You have no idea who you're dealing with, do you? Enlighten us. You're dealing with someone who grew up with nothing, who fought for everything he has, and who will never, ever, let scum like you threaten his children. Douglas's smile faded. Mr. Goodrich, you seem to be under the impression that you have choices here. I have choices, and I choose to end this right now. That's when the FBI tactical team emerged from concealment positions around the park, their weapons trained on Douglas and his companions. Federal agents, get on the ground now. The next few minutes were chaos, shouts, drawn weapons, and the sound of handcuffs clicking as 3 more links in the criminal chain were severed. But Drew felt only relief as FBI Special Agent Maggie Atkinson approached him. Nice work, Mr. Goodrich. We've been tracking the Mountain Vista operation for 2 years, but we could never get close enough to the leadership. Your cooperation gave us exactly what we needed. What about Catherine? She'll be charged under federal racketeering statutes now. Between the murder conspiracy and the money laundering operation, she's looking at life without parole. As Drew walked back to his truck, his phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Kids are asking when they can go home. Drew smiled for the first time in days. Home. They could finally go home, and they could stay there. The nightmare Catherine had started was over, and the criminals who tried to turn his town into their personal hunting ground were in federal custody. Emma and Jake would never have to run, never have to hide, never have to fear that their mother's choices would destroy their future. Drew had made sure of that. The foster kid who'd learned to fight for survival had become a father who'd fought for his children's freedom. And he'd won. Chapter 8, Justice Served. 6 months later, Drew sat in federal court in Denver, watching as Catherine was led into the courtroom in orange prison scrubs and shackles. The woman who'd once been the center of his world looked thin and pale, her elegant appearance replaced by the harsh reality of federal detention. Emma and Jake sat beside him, both wearing their best clothes for what the judge had called an important day for justice. Emma, now 11, understood more than Drew wished she did about their mother's crimes. Jake, still 9, mainly understood that the scary time was finally over. Dad, Emma whispered, do we have to be here? No, sweetheart, but I thought it was important for you to see how this ends. The prosecution's case had been devastating. FBI evidence showed that Mountain Vista Investments was connected to a network of criminal enterprises across the Midwest. Catherine hadn't just been helping plan Drew's murder. She'd been providing intelligence for a criminal organization that had killed at least 7 other people in similar insurance scams across 3 states. Catherine's defense attorney, Russell Bishop, had tried every angle. He'd claimed she was coerced, manipulated, frightened into cooperation. He'd argued that she was a victim of Ivan Savage's manipulation, that she'd never intended for anyone to actually die. But the evidence told a different story. Catherine's own handwriting, meticulously planning Drew's death. Bank records showing payments received over an 18-month period. Phone recordings of her discussing other potential targets in Millbrook, ranking them by wealth and vulnerability. The most damning evidence had come from Catherine herself. FBI agents had recorded her conversations with Douglas Drew and other Mountain Vista operatives while she was out on bail. Believing she was safe from surveillance, Catherine had discussed expanding their operations, recommended new targets, and even suggested ways to make future murders more convincing. U.S. District Judge Kenneth Bullock called the court to order. Drew had researched the judge and learned he was a no-nonsense former prosecutor with a reputation for harsh sentences in organized crime cases. "The defendant will rise," Judge Bullock said. Catherine stood beside her attorney, her face carefully composed. Even now, facing a life sentence, she was performing. Drew wondered if the real Catherine, whoever that was, had ever existed, or if she'd always been this cold calculator wearing different masks for different purposes. "Catherine Clements Goodrich," the judge continued, "you have been found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, insurance fraud, and operating as part of a continuing criminal enterprise. Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything to say?" Catherine's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she shook her head and stepped forward. "Your Honor, I want to apologize to my children." Drew felt Emma tense beside him. "Emma and Jake, Mommy made terrible mistakes. I got involved with bad people who made me do bad things. I want you to know that everything I did because I thought it would give you a better life." Drew felt anger flare. Even now, Catherine was lying, trying to rewrite history to make herself the victim. She'd planned his murder for money and power, not for their children's benefit. "I also want to apologize to my husband." "Drew, you deserved better than what I became." Judge Bullock interrupted. "Mrs. Clements Goodrich, the evidence in this case shows 18 months of premeditated planning to murder your husband and facilitate the targeting of other innocent families. This court finds no evidence of coercion or diminished capacity. Your actions were calculated, voluntary, and resulted in multiple deaths across several states." Catherine's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Taking into account the severity of your crimes, your leadership role in this criminal enterprise, and the complete absence of genuine remorse," Judge Bullock continued, "I sentence you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell with finality. Catherine sagged slightly, the reality of never again being free hitting her at last. She turned toward Drew and the children, her mouth opening as if to say something more. But Emma had heard enough. Drew's 11-year-old daughter stood up in the courtroom and looked directly at her mother. "You're not my mom anymore," Emma said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "My mom wouldn't have tried to hurt my dad." Catherine's face crumpled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Drew saw something that might have been genuine emotion. But it was too late for authenticity, too late for regret, too late for anything except the consequences of her choices. As U.S. Marshals led Catherine away, she looked back one final time. Drew met her gaze and saw a stranger, someone he'd never really known despite 12 years of marriage. The woman he'd loved had been a fiction, a character Catherine had played while planning his destruction. Outside the courthouse, FBI Special Agent Maggie Atkinson briefed Drew on the broader investigation. "Mountain Vista is finished," she reported. "We've arrested 37 people across 6 states, seized millions in assets, and prevented at least a dozen planned murders. Your cooperation was instrumental in breaking up one of the most sophisticated criminal operations we've encountered." "What about the other victims? The families in different states?" "They're getting justice too. Douglas Drew is cooperating fully, providing information about crimes going back 5 years. The organization Catherine was helping build would have killed hundreds of people if we hadn't stopped it." Drew looked at his children, who were talking quietly with Marcus Reed near the courthouse steps. They looked older than they had 6 months ago, but also stronger. They'd survived having their world destroyed and had come through it intact. "Agent Atkinson, can I ask you something?" "Of course. In your professional opinion, did Catherine ever love us? Me and the kids?" The FBI agent considered the question carefully. "Mr. Goodrich, I've spent 20 years investigating criminals. The ones who shock me the most are the ones who can compartmentalize completely, who can genuinely feel love for their family while simultaneously planning to destroy them for personal gain." "So you think she did love us?" "I think Catherine loved the idea of loving you. I think she loved the life you provided, the status, the comfort. But real love requires empathy, and empathy was something Catherine seemed to lack entirely." Drew nodded, finding an odd comfort in that assessment. Catherine had been incapable of the kind of love that put family before self-interest. It wasn't that Drew had been insufficient. It was that Catherine had been fundamentally broken in ways he'd never recognized. That evening, Drew sat in his living room with Emma and Jake, the 3 of them closer than they'd ever been. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if Catherine's presence had been casting a shadow he'd never noticed. "Dad," Jake said, curled up against Drew's side. "Are we going to be okay now?" "We're going to be better than okay, buddy. We're going to be great." Emma looked up from her book. "Dad, I'm glad you didn't die." Drew pulled both children close. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Outside, Millbrook continued its quiet mountain existence, unaware of how close it had come to becoming a hunting ground for professional killers. The community that had embraced Drew as a young businessman and watched his family grow was safe because one man had refused to be a victim. Drew thought about the foster kid who'd learned to survive by fighting back against bullies and predators. That kid had grown up to become a man who'd fought for his children's future and won. Catherine had underestimated her husband's capacity for survival, and that mistake had cost her everything. Justice wasn't just about Catherine facing consequences for her crimes. Justice was Emma and Jake sleeping safely in their own beds, growing up in the town Drew had built his life around, free from the shadow of their mother's betrayal. The dry cleaner's warning had saved Drew's life, but Drew's actions had saved his children's future. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 1 year after Catherine's sentencing, Drew stood in the gymnasium of Millbrook Elementary School, watching Emma receive an award for academic excellence. Jake sat beside him in the folding chair, fidgeting with excitement as his sister's name was called. "Emma Goodrich," the principal announced, Student of the Year for outstanding achievement in mathematics and science. Drew's daughter walked across the stage with confidence, her head held high. She'd grown 4 inches in the past year and developed a maturity that sometimes concerned Drew, but ultimately made him proud. Emma had faced the worst kind of family crisis and emerged stronger. As applause filled the gymnasium, Drew felt a familiar presence beside him. Benny Cook, the dry cleaner who'd saved his life, settled into the empty chair with a smile. "She looks just like you when you're concentrating on a difficult problem," Benny observed. "She's smarter than me. Maybe, but she's got your backbone." "Both kids do." Drew glanced around the gymnasium at the familiar faces of Millbrook. These people had supported him and his children through the worst period of their lives, never asking intrusive questions, but always offering help when needed. The Morrison family had even established a scholarship fund for Emma and Jake's college education, a gesture that had moved Drew to tears. After the ceremony, Drew treated the kids to dinner at their favorite restaurant. It had become their tradition, celebrating the small victories that made life worth living. "Dad," Emma said over dessert, "are you ever going to date anyone?" The question caught Drew off guard. "Where did that come from?" "Mrs. Henderson asked me if you were seeing anyone. I think she likes you." Jake wrinkled his nose. Dad doesn't need a girlfriend. Everyone needs someone to care about them," Emma said with 11-year-old wisdom. "Don't you, Dad?" Drew considered the question. His lawyer Vincent Sellers had been encouraging him to start dating. Marcus Reed had introduced him to several eligible women in town. But Drew had been focused entirely on rebuilding his children's sense of security and normalcy. "Maybe someday," Drew said. "But right now, I have everything I need." That wasn't entirely true. Drew had been thinking more about companionship lately, about the possibility of finding someone who could love him and his children without agenda or calculation. But he was cautious in ways he'd never been before Catherine's betrayal. The next morning, Drew arrived at his construction site to find an unexpected visitor. Special Agent Maggie Atkinson stood beside her government sedan, looking professional despite the early hour. "Agent Atkinson, what brings you to Millbrook?" "Closure," she said simply. "The Mountain Vista case is officially closed. Every defendant has been sentenced, every asset has been seized, and every victim has received justice. Including Catherine. Especially Catherine. She was the key to the entire operation, Drew. Without her intelligence about potential targets, the organization would never have been able to expand beyond Chicago." Drew nodded, but he felt nothing when Catherine was mentioned anymore. Not anger, not sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that she'd once been part of his life. "There's something else," Agent Atkinson continued. "The federal government is prepared to offer you a reward for your cooperation in breaking up the criminal enterprise. It's substantial." "How substantial?" $5 million. Drew stared at her. $5 million. The operation you helped us shut down had stolen over $50 million from victims across the country. The reward money comes from seized assets. It's yours if you want it. Drew thought about what $5 million could mean for his family. College funds for Emma and Jake, financial security, the ability to expand his business, or even retire early. But something about accepting money connected to Catherine's crimes felt wrong. Agent Atkinson, I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about it. Of course. But Drew, you earned this money. You risked your life to stop killers who were targeting innocent families. Don't let Catherine's crimes prevent you from accepting compensation you deserve. That evening, Drew discussed the reward offer with his children over dinner. $5 million? Jake's eyes went wide. Dad, we could buy a rocket ship. Emma was more practical. What would you do with that much money? Drew had been thinking about that all day. I'm not sure. Part of me thinks we should donate it to help other crime victims. Part of me thinks we should save it for your college educations and future. What does your heart tell you? Emma asked. Drew smiled at his daughter's question. My heart tells me that money connected to your mother's crimes might not bring us happiness. Then don't take it, Emma said simply. We don't need $5 million to be happy. Jake nodded agreement. We're already happy. 2 days later, Drew called Agent Atkinson with his decision. I want to donate the reward money to establish a victim services fund. Families who've lost loved ones to crimes like Catherine's, they need help rebuilding their lives. Are you sure, Drew? I'm sure. Catherine tried to destroy my family for money. I'm not going to let money, even legitimate money, define how we move forward. 6 months later, the Goodrich Family Victim Services Fund held its first fundraising gala at the Millbrook Community Center. Drew watched with pride as the ballroom filled with friends, business associates, and community leaders who'd come to support families affected by violent crimes. Drew, Vincent Sellers approached with a woman Drew didn't recognize. I'd like you to meet Dr. Abigail Barrett. She runs the Children's Counseling Program at Denver General. Dr. Barrett was attractive in an understated way. Auburn hair, kind eyes, and the sort of calm presence that suggested she dealt with crisis professionally. She was also, Drew noticed, not wearing a wedding ring. Mr. Goodrich, your fund has already helped 3 families in our program. The money you've raised is making a real difference. That's the goal. Vincent tells me you're a single father raising 2 children after a traumatic situation. Drew glanced at Vincent, who was trying to look innocent. That's right. It's remarkable that you've channeled your experience into helping others rather than becoming bitter or withdrawn. I had good reasons to stay positive, Drew said, gesturing toward Emma and Jake, who were helping serve refreshments. Those 2 give me perspective on what really matters. Dr. Barrett smiled. They seem like wonderful children. You should be proud. As the evening progressed, Drew found himself talking with Dr. Barrett about their shared interest in helping trauma victims. She was intelligent, compassionate, and refreshingly honest about her own experiences with difficult cases. Can I ask you something personal? She said as the gala wound down. Sure. Do you ever worry about trusting someone again? After what your wife did? Drew considered the question. Every day? But I've realized that letting Catherine's betrayal prevent me from trusting anyone else would be giving her power over my future. And I'm not willing to do that. That's a healthy perspective. What about you? Ever been married? Divorced 3 years ago. Not nearly as dramatic as your situation. Just 2 people who realized they wanted different things from life. Drew found himself hoping Dr. Barrett's different things might include the possibility of getting to know a construction worker and his 2 children. As the evening ended and guests began to leave, Emma appeared at Drew's elbow. Dad, I like her. Who? Dr. Barrett. She's smart, and she's pretty, and she didn't talk to Jake and me like we were little kids. Emma, we just met her. So? You have to start somewhere. Drew laughed at his daughter's matchmaking attempts. But as he watched Dr. Barrett say goodbye to other guests, he found himself thinking that Emma might be right. Starting somewhere was exactly what he needed to do. 3 years later, Drew stood in the same church where he'd married Catherine, but this time the circumstances were entirely different. Abigail Barrett walked down the aisle in a simple cream-colored dress, her eyes focused on Drew with the kind of genuine love he now recognized as authentic. Emma and Jake flanked Drew as his best man and best woman, their faces beaming with happiness. They'd grown to love Abigail not as a replacement for Catherine, but as something entirely different. A woman who chose to join their family rather than manipulate it. As they exchanged vows, Drew felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced since discovering Catherine's betrayal. But it was different this time, built on truth rather than illusion. on shared values rather than shared convenience. Do you, Drew Goodrich, take Abigail Barrett to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Drew kissed Abigail with the knowledge that this was a beginning built on solid ground. Emma and Jake cheered, and the small congregation of friends and family applauded. Later, at the reception, Benny Cook approached Drew with tears in his eyes. You know, Drew, when I found that note in Catherine's coat, I thought I was saving your life. But watching you today, I realized I was really saving your future. Drew hugged the old man who'd started this entire chain of events with his warning. Thank you, Benny, for everything. As the evening wound down, Drew stood with Abigail on the deck of the community center, looking out over the lights of Millbrook. His children were inside, dancing with their new stepmother and laughing with friends who'd become extended family. Any regrets? Abigail asked. Drew considered the question. Catherine was serving life without parole in federal prison. The criminal organization she'd helped build was dismantled. The families they'd targeted were safe. His children were happy, healthy, and secure. No regrets, Drew said. Catherine taught me something valuable, even if she didn't mean to. What's that? She taught me the difference between someone who says they love you and someone who actually does. Drew pulled his new wife close and looked back through the windows at Emma and Jake, both of whom had grown into remarkable young people despite the trauma of their early years. They'd faced the worst kind of family crisis and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more resilient. The foster kid who'd learned to survive had become a man who'd learned to thrive. The husband who'd been betrayed had become a father who'd protected his children and built them a new future. The victim of a murder conspiracy had become a man who'd helped dozens of other crime victims rebuild their lives. Catherine had tried to destroy everything Drew valued, but she'd ultimately given him something she'd never intended: the knowledge that he was strong enough to overcome anything, smart enough to outmaneuver professional killers, and loved enough by his children to rebuild their world from scratch. The dry cleaner's warning had saved his life, but Drew's choices had saved his future. And that future, surrounded by people who genuinely loved him, was brighter than anything he'd dared to hope for during those dark days when he'd first discovered his wife's betrayal. Drew Goodrich had won more than just survival. He'd won the right to happiness, and he intended to protect that right for the rest of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.